So why don't you start by, I guess, explaining for
UBI,
the
as the
for
cool
the
kids
listeners,
call it.
Yeah,
UBI.
UBI.
For the kids that don't know what UBI is.
So depending on who you ask, some people are going to be like, well, isn't that just welfare? And then other people are going to say, well, no, it's actually a basic income. I just read an article about it. Actually, this one just was published when I was reading it today, published 9 hours ago. So this morning on
Gotta love
Vox.
the internet.
Yeah. But they were saying, they're like, what if we gave you $1,000 a month just for being alive?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially they were talking about what you can do with $1,000. And they went into the way that the welfare system is set up is so that you'll get credits. So you can be you can spend this EBT. You'll be able to spend this amount of stuff on food. Or if you need healthcare, you've got to go through these providers here. Mm-hmm. Or if you need this, you got to go through these guys here. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of really strict rules and regulations.
And what you qualify for and all that.
Yeah,
kind of
what
stuff.
you qualify for. Or there's something I thought if you're on welfare, isn't it something where the moment you get a job, that's it, the welfare's done? You have to. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm not sure.
I'll put it this way.
That's unemployment. I know
I'll put it
that.
this way. That stuff can turn off like that.
Yeah,
and whatever the situation is that will cut it off, it'll happen instantly.
Yeah, and everything that I've read is that it's the way that the system is set up. It's almost counterintuitive, where you want to supply the funding to people to get back up on their feet.
Yeah.
But then the moment as they just start to get to the point where they're on their feet, they're like, all right, cool, well, you got this now, and then they cut that off, and you're like, oh fuck, and you fall back down. Yeah. So essentially, the way that universal basic income works is that everyone gets money. So essentially, every report that I've read is that it's a check from the government every month, and
Just for existing.
and you get to spend that on whatever you need. Whether you need to spend it on food, or maybe you need that extra money to repair your car, or maybe heroin. Yeah. And so now we'll get into that.
One of the ones I saw was some guy made a plan where he's like, you get this amount of money per year, but X amount of it goes to healthcare. So everyone automatically gets free healthcare out of their UBI.
Okay. Well, and again, there's a lot of, I haven't seen anything where it's a set standard where you have to be.
There's a lot of different ideas.
Different variations. Yeah. What the thing that excited me the most about it is that I was reading about, I'm going to look at my notes here, about I can never pronounce the name of the city, but it's in Manitoba, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and so this is the one it was called Mincome from 1974 to 1979. And essentially they gave people, depending on how your family breaks down and how much money you're bringing in, between $38,000 and $3,800 and $5,800. That's a much more reasonable number.
A month?
A year.
So
This is back in the 70s.
This is back in the 70s.
Okay, gotcha.
For inflation, again, this is Canadian dollars, but for inflation, that comes out to about between $16,000 and $25,000. So, that's some money.
Yeah, what I heard was the plans that I was hearing about, I think were around $10,000 to $12,000 a year.
Yeah, and so the point is that this has been the baseline for everything, or for all of the reports that I've read, is they take the poverty line and they give you just enough money, guaranteed money per year, to put you over that poverty line.
Right.
And so essentially it's how much money do you need to, hit right at that point? Here you go. Sorry. So the one from Canada, the one that I was talking about from 74 to 79, what I liked about how that system was set up is that it essentially was an additional income. So they didn't penalize you for deciding if you wanted to work. Essentially what happened is that instead of being it just cut off and be well, you've got a job, so no more benefits. It's for every dollar that you make outside of this system, they take away 50 cents from it. So you could be making, they were saying that there's some families that only made $100, but there's also some families that, made the full $3,800 or $5,800. And so it wasn't, essentially there's families that used it to, essentially just supplement their income. If somebody got sick.
So you're saying every dollar they took away 50 cents from your mincome?
Correct.
Mincome.
So $1 over a certain threshold?
No, for every dollar that you bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Before pre-tax?
Over the line.
Yeah, over the line is
what you're saying.
Over the line.
So in real simple terms, let's say the line's $25. You made $26. You take 50 cents off.
Gotcha.
For making $26.
So over a certain threshold.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the big thing that I read about now is everyone's like, well, if I gave you $12,000 a year to live off of, you're not going to go work. And they're like, well, with this system, people wanted to go work. Like they just used it to be able to, get on their feet and cover themselves when they were sick and cover themselves when they needed food or some additional expense.
And see, that's one of the arguments against UBI that I heard was, well, if I just give you this money, you're not going to do anything. But try living off of only $1,000 a month.
Right.
That's going to be pretty hard. I mean, rent alone in this area, even for like a small place, is at least for a 1-bedroom apartment, minimum is like $650.
Right. And that's real low.
And that's really low.
Yeah. I mean, the problem I would have with that, though, is you get like a 3-bedroom place and then you get your 3 buddies to all pitch in your free income. And then you're like, you could just totally float on that with your 3 buddies and then just start piling in girlfriends.
And that's one of the things they talked about was the article that I read, this was months ago, was you'd have these communes of people just pooling all their money together and making something. And the argument or the counter argument was, so?
Yeah, what's like, again, if they're working together as community, like, fucking do it. Mm-hmm. So I get what you're saying is that, and the problem is, you have that now. You have that now where people are just like, I've got welfare. I don't need anything else.
Right.
But what this does is this, instead of, there's always going to be somebody out there that's going to try and game the system, period. Doesn't matter what system you create, somebody out there.
People that game
until Star Trek.
Until
we live in Star Trek.
So, but what this does is this takes the people that are trying to use the system to their benefit and actually become some kind of, contribution to society. This is more beneficial for them. And then the other thing as well, and this is the one from the study in Canada, the rates of people going to school for the decade of 1971 to 1980, like they had the highest amount of school attendance from 1974 through 1979. Like the school attendance was the highest that they had ever seen. So there's tons of people going to school. There was less people who were sick. There and granted, a lot of that is all like people are like, well, it could have been for this, could have also been for this. But when you take away the stress of, am I going to be able to put food on my table?
Right.
Like, am I going to be able to feed my kids? Am I going to, be able to spend time with my family, or am I worried about working a second job? Like all of those things benefit a household, and all those things are, I think beneficial to everyone.
Mm-hmm. I have a question.
Go for it.
Why did they end it?
So they ended it because essentially there was an election where a bunch more fiscally conservative people came over and they're like, "Yeah, that's not happening," and they cut that,
even though it was working.
So here's the thing. So there technically hasn't been from the actual city's officials. They haven't released still to this day released a report on their findings. Huh. Weird. Now there is a lady named Dr. Forget, and I don't entirely know if that's how it's pronounced, but it's definitely
Forget, maybe.
Well, it's Forget. So
it's probably French.
That's probably French as fuck.
So again, it's Canada. So Canada. She was able to find out where all the reports were, and apparently it was like something like 1,800 square feet of paper documents documenting this whole thing.
Holy shit.
And she's been going through it since 2005. Good. And all of her findings, that's where a lot of the stuff that I was getting, all of her findings have been, showing that it's beneficial. But again, there hasn't been an official report.
The fact that it hasn't been released makes me think that it probably is good.
That's what I'm thinking
or
too.
Or it could be bad.
Or it could be bad.
And the government doesn't want to publicize a
whoops,
failed,
we fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I could see it going either way.
So this was back in the 70s.
Right.
So what about taxes and just
right.
I imagine that eggs are, if everyone has an additional $12,000, eggs might just suddenly go to $3 because everyone can afford it.
So that's a concern is definitely inflation. Yeah. And from everything that I've seen is that inflation is always thrown around as like, this is big, this is scary, this is bad. And yes, there is going to be inflation, but everyone always talks about checks and balances. Eventually it's going to get to a point where, people can't afford it too. So they will have to drop it again. Look, like if you take the whole McDonald's Big Mac theory, where you send it over to Australia, where Australia, the minimum wage is $21 an hour or some bullshit. So it's $21 an hour. The Big Mac's still only like $5. So again, like based on that theory that a Big Mac can be a good usage of judging inflation, like there's still not that much inflation over there in regards to that. Now, granted, other things are more expensive. Housing's outrageous.
That's my thing. I was reading one thing today. A real estate investor, he kind of jokingly said he's all about this because he says that would increase the average cost of basically rent or anything like that.
Right.
Would raise it because everyone would be like, well, everyone's making X amount of dollars no matter what, so we can set our rent to that minimum,
right,
and then make things more expensive from there, which would then raise the cost.
So
real estate investors, they're all about it, because they get more money. But I think that it would bring about more increased expensive living.
I mean, maybe again, that's the problem with this is all hypothetical.
Of course, the entire thing is.
And you also have to look at like there's situations again to go back to Canada that Vancouver's dealing with right now. Where the same situation, everyone's like, well, the cost of living is going up, so we're going to raise our rent, and we're going to be able to do this, and all these people are buying these buildings, and so obviously the cost is going up and up and up and up. And as of right now, there's something like 25,000 homes in Vancouver that aren't being used. And so that's why they're
just empty.
They're just empty because real estate investors came in and bought it, and they're trying to rent it, and the rent's too high. People can't afford to live there. So now they're instilling fee or starting up fees for people that are having property that's not being used. So I mean, again, it's all going to rely on checks and balances. But the real reason why I brought it up and the reason why I really touched base on it is Elon Musk again brought it up a couple of days ago, where he says that
we've already mentioned him today. So
a couple of times.
I'm not going to forget about it.
I mean, we're and there's a really good I can't think of the guy's name. Robert, who's the economist?
Branson? Oh no, that's Richard Branson.
Reich. Robert
Reich.
Robert Reich. Yeah, Robert Reich.
That's a supervillain name.
I know, right? So Robert Reich has a really good video. It's like a 3.5 minute video that you can watch on YouTube.
I like his videos.
His fantastic. Plus, who the hell else can doodle on a whiteboard like that guy?
Yeah.
But anyway, he's got a video. It's about 4 minutes long that explains like why we need something like universal basic income in the future. And essentially, it's talking about how we're all going to be, or the majority of us are going to be replaced by automation.
That is very true.
And so eventually,
I mean, McDonald's has speaking of Big Macs and everything, there's a lot of in other countries even.
Right.
I think in Australia actually. Your order is now taken by a machine.
Right. And we do that here. And now, funny side note about that, there's a McDonald's in Wesley Chapel that talked about how they're like, well, we're not going to have any cashiers. We're switching all over to the automated telling things, blah, blah, blah. You put in your order. And then he said, it's great. We're actually going to have to build a larger kitchen and hire more kitchen workers to be able to fund. So this thing where they're like, well, we're cutting down on our cashiers, but now we have to hire more cooks because we can have a higher turnout. And so you're like, so you paid for these machines and now you have more cooks that are actually getting paid more than your cashiers. So it's funny where they're saying they're like, we're trying to do this automation, but it didn't really help them.
I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination, but throughout history, we've become more automatized stuff, but other jobs become available.
Right.
A couple of years, how many years ago did we think that social media would be a job? You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
well, there's some things that a robot just can't do.
But then you go to a robot, robots are to do a big part of manufacturing, but at some point in the future, it's going to be 100%.
Sure. And that's what Robert Reich's video is about. Is that eventually it's going to come to the point where, we're going to have like a Star Trek replicator where that's all we need. Mm-hmm. And so what happens when these people don't have the money to buy things?
Yeah.
And so a universal basic income would allow that, where they'd have money to be able to spend.
Yeah, if you're like a blue collar worker with no education, and all the minimum wage jobs are eaten up by robots, what are you going to do?
I do have something to say about that, though.
Sure.
In terms of, it's so easy to learn stuff now. Let's say you are an uneducated person. I hate to say that. That sounds weird.
You've got to be willing. There's two things there. You got to be willing to do it, and you got to be able to invest the time. So,
but the thing is, everybody has time to get better at something.
Some people don't, though, and that's the thing. And that's what we get to with like the minimum wage job is that I did that. I worked 80 hours a week, 2 jobs, trying to support myself. When you're working 80 hours a week, you barely have time to sleep.
Yeah,
like there's no way you're going to be able to pick up a book or take a class. And so this system is something to help again somebody's going to game the system. That's going to happen. But this is a system that's in place to allow somebody to not have to work 80 hours a week, where they can, work 40 hours a week, make some money off this, and go back to school.
And the only problem, I agree that if you set your mind to it and you have the time, you can learn.
You can learn anything.
But some people don't know how to learn. They were never taught how to teach themselves to do something. And those are the people that I would be concerned about.
It's getting easier to learn stuff.
It totally is. You can go on YouTube and figure out anything. You know what I mean? So I'm like in the middle of this UBI thing. I still haven't read enough about it.
Well, so you can learn more, but again, now you're looking, and that's where like you get into other checks and balances. Is that how many people can learn, any kind of creative program like graphic design or filming or any of that stuff? But you're going to end up going somewhere, and they're just going to be like, well, that's cool. Like some kid off the street's not going to be able to create a graphic design portfolio, and there's some job somewhere that's going to be like, well, this stuff looks good, but do you have a degree?
I mean, well, you take. I get that, but take the world of design out of that, because that's not how.
Okay, well, so fine. But you know what I mean. Like you can learn how to do something and just be like, well, do you have experience? Do you have a degree? You don't.
In terms of degrees, it's getting easier to get degrees now too.
Is it? Because the prices of degrees are outrageous.
It's expensive, but you still have the option to do it and faster.
But again, if you're working 80 hours a week, you don't.
But $12,000 isn't going to give you a degree. It's not going to make you go to college. It's not going to even pay for like the first class.
But what it's going to do is it's going to allow you to again reinvest.
Maybe that guy doesn't have to work 80 hours now. Maybe he only has to work 40, and then he has time to go to school and get a better job, if he wants to. But education. That's like that's
another thing.
I don't know. So what are some of the big? Did you read about any of the cons? Or
I guess
Christian.
Again, the cons for me are people that are going to game the system. How are we going to pay for it?
Right.
What happens with inflation? Stuff like that, and that's all very real concerns.
Is this becoming our Social Security then? Is Social Security out, pensions
out?
Social
Security's already out.
Well,
man.
I know,
I think to do this, I think you... okay. I'm starting to remember. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm starting to remember the article that I read. And in order to pay for this plan, you'd have to get pretty much rid of all social programs.
Right.
Including Social Security.
And pensions.
Right. And not necessarily, because pensions are normally a privatized thing.
Yeah.
So I'm talking government social programs like welfare, Social Security, food stamps, all that kind of stuff. Okay. That goes out the window.
All government handouts.
And that's another bad thing too, is you have to fire all those employees that work that too.
Who work all the government jobs?
That work all those government jobs, which our conservative over here doesn't care about that. But they would lose jobs. So that's a lot of. I forget how many jobs.
Thousands. It's a lot of jobs.
Isn't there more government officials than people working in manufacturing in America?
So I don't know if that's. I
government takes forever, so I'm sure because it has to pass through like 100 hands. Just
and so there's some very real red tape. But as an example, how you can like a example of that working. I just learned about a system in Massachusetts where they're trying to take the funding that's going to homeless shelters, and instead of sending it to homeless shelters where it's being not spent as well as it could be, they're trying to take that and set up a system of insurance for landowners to be able to rent out properties to people who would normally be using a homeless shelter. Because normally those a landlord's not going to rent a house to somebody who's just like, this guy's homeless. He's probably going to ruin my house or skip out on next month's rent, and then I'm fucked. And so they took the funding they're thinking about taking the funding from homeless shelters, investing it into an insurance policy, so a landlord could be like, hey, I know you're down on your luck, but I'm going to give you a shot. You can rent my place. You have a house over your head, and you've got water and all this jazz. So yeah.
All right. I did some quick math.
Yes.
I think this is correct.
Okay.
So at 350 million people,
yep.
if we all give them $10,000 a year,
yep.
you're looking at $3.5 trillion. So
well, that's
what we got.
Let me cut a check real quick.
I mean, the Federal Reserve just makes money out of thin air. So
that is like my last argument against it, though, is that's going to come from us, taxes, right? So aren't wealthy people going to just start putting their money elsewhere?
in terms of what?
Swiss bank accounts, stuff like that. So it's not here. It's not going to get taxed.
No, they do that already.
Well, they'll just keep doing it. I think. I
don't think they're ever going to stop though, and unless the problem is the Congress has all these loopholes that they put into law for rich people that they get paid from, basically, essentially, so that these rich people and companies like Apple, who has their tax haven in Ireland and hardly pays anything in taxes, Carnival Cruise Lines, which I worked for, profited like $1 billion a couple of years ago. They paid $1 in taxes.
Right.
Because of tax havens. Because their company is technically in Panama.
Yeah.
Even though they have, they run out of the United States.
Yeah, well, what would stop more people from doing that is what I'm saying. Like, I would see that as being a very common thing to not be taxed even more.
Right. Well, I don't think
rich people.
I don't think we'd be taxed more because we're getting rid of all the social programs. That's what's actually paying for it. So
that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we spend $3.5 trillion in social programs, which I don't think, 50% of our budget's military. So
that's something I was going to say.
What are your?
I'm completely against it. I like the idea.
Wait, you are not completely against.
I'm completely against.
You're completely against it. Okay.
Mainly, I like the idea of it, and I like helping people. I'm not mean. Right. I made it maybe a little bit harsh. Don't know how it's going to be paid for. That's a lot of money, and that's yearly. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that being said, our government is not great about spending money.
No.
I think even the conservative that I am, we spend way too much fucking money in the military. Don't we already have enough missiles to blow up the planet like 1 million times?
Yeah.
We don't need to make any more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think we have enough soldiers. I think you just stop. America, cut it out. I know free to remain free is what they say, but
I think they should just pull troops back from everywhere.
No, look,
cut the budget down, but
so
military doesn't want to hear that.
And then you take the money, do something else with it. So I'm not saying America's great at spending money or saving money because it's not. But my main thing is there's a philosophy in dealing with business or living that I believe in, which is called rewards and penalties. You may have read it at Postcard Mania. Basically, when it gets down to it, is you reward people that are up statistic and you penalize people that are down statistic. Stats, if you're good, you get a reward. Bad, you don't. And that's how a company or group flourishes. Let's say you have someone who has not showed up to work for 3 days. You don't give him a vacation. But the guy who's been working his ass off, you give him a vacation.
Right.
And that's a very small scale, but I think that principle can be applied everywhere.
Is it? I think I know what you're talking about. In other words, you don't give someone just something for free because that creates a weird relationship between the two. Or
it comes down to exchange. Like if you do a service, you get paid for it, you get a favor or whatever your system of your exchange is.
Right.
And I believe that with everything.
Sure.
In your relationship, the guy doesn't pay for everything. Maybe he pays for everything financially, but the partner does something else for exchange. And that's kind of so all of these people. You brought it there.
Oh yeah.
So that's my main thing is it's the how to afford it. It's a lot of money.
One thing to keep in mind about the how to afford it is that while that money doesn't just disappear, that money goes into the hands of people who have to spend that money.
True, but it's still like trillions of dollars a year.
Right.
So it's just like I feel like for maybe a couple of years, maybe even 10 years, like that place in Canada, it might go okay. Right. But I think after a while, I think you're going to get what happens when people get so accustomed to receiving that all of a sudden they can't.
Right.
I think that creates some strife,
like Social Security.
Exactly. Yeah. But I famously in college, this is more of a joke because like I'm very much like if you don't earn, I don't believe it. You're not earned $1. You're not owed $1 that you don't earn. And in college, in my political science class, I was known as that guy. So I pretty much said I was like, yeah, you need to fucking take grandma's check away. And everybody knew me as that guy.
But grandma put money into that system.
I know. It was a joke. It was like, I was like, nobody gets anything from the government. So yeah, it's more of like, I just think it's expensive. I don't really, people game the system. People, like you say, people game any system.
Right.
But I just think it's going to breed laziness because once you give people $1,000, there's going to be argument to give them 15.
So I didn't even get to bring up the aspect of like what these people can do when they're given that financial freedom. That was, and I can't believe I didn't mention any of it because that was a big point of this was that think of how many people don't do something because they can't leave their job. Mm-hmm. Like if, somebody what if the next Steve Jobs wants to create something and he can't because he's like, what? I can't leave my again, the stereotype of I can't leave my 2 jobs because I can't stop paying rent and I can't stop feeding my family, but I really want to do this thing, is that I think that there could be a lot. I see that there could be a lot of negative things that come from it, but I also want to look at the optimistic side and think of all of the good things that can come from it. And that's again what the Robert Reich video like talks about is imagine what we can do when we don't spend all of our time worrying about our basic necessities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's...
I guess my main thing is I don't trust people that much to be positive, to do something positive.
I think a better idea...
I think that there is going to be thousands of people in that situation who are going to be helped, but at the same time, the same amount of people, I think, are just going to...
I think a better idea, instead of just giving people flat-out money, is giving them sort of... Well, they could work, but giving them...
I feel like there's a president who did that once, and it worked out really Oh, FDR, that's right. Sorry. Anyway.
No, I'm saying instead of just giving them flat-out money, why not give them housing credits, give them food credits, basic need credits? Why do people have to work their asses off and slave? In this day and age, I get it. 100 years ago, everyone was a farmer. That's what you had to do to survive. Sure. We don't need to do that anymore. We have the technology and the means now to feed and house every single person on this planet. Yeah. Why can't that be the baseline for everything and then send them off into the world? That's what I feel like.
Sure. I really liked your idea of like it will help you out if you're contributing to something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to contribute to society, definitely.
Yeah, and I would love for there be a way to do that. Like the thing that I was saying about like when they built the infrastructure of America, we're talking the roads, the highway system, the bridges, the dams, all that stuff. They gave these people a job and paid them for their work, and then they were able to. And this was blue collar work. This is work that these people were able to start a family and buy houses on. And I wish there was a system where we could go back to that and where we could be like, you need a job, I have a job, we're gonna pay you, but you're gonna work for it. And I think I thought that's a really, really good system. And I would love to be able to find a way to go back to that.
And who knows, that may be the answer to so many things where because I love that idea too, because that goes back to exchange. Right. It's like you're gonna give us labor, whatever that labor is.
Right.
We're going to give you money, and it's money enough to where you can live. And to me, that's exchange that gives progress. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Right.
Now, if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be sitting in this room.
Well, one of the problems is all of that kind of work goes out to corporations now, and they're not just going to hire anyone. They want someone that best represents their company.
Yeah, but then that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, sure. Of course.
Why companies don't do stuff in the country or whatever.
Right. Of course.
I think it's interesting that we agree on the fact that like I don't like the here's a handout or here's something for free because I agree I know when like I said, when I was working 80 hours a week, all I wanted was an opportunity. I just wanted somebody to give me a chance to do something more.
And honestly, the 80 hours a week thing may be more of a commentary on how some people might be underpaid, and that's on a private level.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Like, what 80 hours a week? That's a shit ton of. That's 2 jobs. I'm sure it did. To me, is like I don't know what you were doing, but you feel like that person would make enough money to live on just 40 hours. Like I think companies should, on a private level, should make it to where all their employees can live. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If that means cutting their own losses to make sure their employees are happy, so they can continue to produce for that company. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, fucking deep.
I know.
Let's talk about boobs or something now. I don't know.
Boobs!
I'm just kidding.
God, I'm so depressed now. The state of the world.
I know.
That's really what Serious Casual is all about. Saving
Being
the world.
seriously depressed. Yeah, that's what. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. So you're saving the world. That's it. No, but I think we all, like Christian said, we all kind of agree that we'd all like.
All people would be happy.
Yeah, we want all the people to be happy, but there's a lot of people right now that are not, and in shitty, dire situations.
Yep.
How can we help them without just handing stuff out. There's
got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
Communism. No. Well, maybe, I don't know.
No.
Ezra talks about when she was growing up in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia used to be a communist nation, and they would have for building roads and everything like that. They didn't actually pay the people. They gave them. This might have been after Yugoslavia dissolved. They just had volunteer parties basically, and they'd just pay people in lunches. So all the students would go there while they're when their classes are out. They'd go there and they'd build stuff and they'd get a free lunch.
So I go build a road, and you gave me a Chipotle burrito.
Yeah, it sounds. But their housing is paid for and all that other stuff, so they don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So
I'd be willing to if I needed to contribute 10, 20 hours a week to bettering my community, and knowing that if I do that, I'll be fed and housed. Yeah. Again, depending on the
situations. That might be a great way to do it. Mandatory community service in exchange for that $10,000.
Mandatory community service.
Yeah.
Community service. Then defeat the point of community service.
Yeah.
No.
That sounds like slavery.
No. If you want that check, it's an exchange.
Well, what if you're disabled?
There's something you can do. There's got to be something you can do.
Yeah, there's got to be.
Right.
My community. Okay, so in Florida, they have the Bright Future Scholarship, where you have to do a certain amount of community service hours.
And that's
I ran the computer lab at the public library.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in a wheelchair could do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a perfect system, but it's. I think.
But I think that's getting closer to it. So it's not a free handout. You're doing something, picking up trash at the beach or building a road.
But is that enough to pay for your housing and food completely?
Oh, if everyone pitched in and did it, I don't know. What's $1,000? Let's see. Let's tally that up really quick. I'm going to tally that up. How many hours are we talking per week?
Say
5. Let's say 5. So
let's make it an 8-hour workday.
So you have to do. Well, see, now you're cutting people's weekends out because they got to spend time with their family. That's why I was thinking, I don't know. See, this is the imperfect system we live in. Let's just say 20 hours a whole month. I'm just curious what that comes out to. Yeah, that's $50 an hour. Well, it's government wages right there. Anyways.
We're not going to solve the problems today, guys.
On this show.
Nope. No one accused us of being
tried, America.
great economists.